our military threatening people to get off of rice trucks and the bean trucks and all that with M16s, and it did not deter them. But what did help was calm talking and coming to resolution about how to get the food distributed. And I think that, with prayer and with good, just, even if somebody is belligerent, even if somebody is waving a gun around, even if somebody is so desperate, like for their own family, that they threaten you, through prayer and through talking to them in a calm manner, coming to some kind of conclusion about how to share food or how to share things in a common sense manner, would probably work a little better than just trying to point a gun at them.
Right.
So, but people just do very crazy things when they are desperate for food.
Oh, I know. In fact, unfortunately, the strong will steal from the weak. I've seen teenagers, big, strong, husky guys, steal things from elderly women just because they're stronger and they can do it. One of the things that we've done, both in the mission field and also in Haiti, I've been there twice this year yet, the way we control medical access and food access, clothing access, they actually made them form single lines. And we were actually in a building that was gated, and we had guards at the gate, and people were allowed in single file, one at a time. And so they might let 10 in at a time, 20 at a time, but it was a limited number. Something was very controllable. And then they were provided several things. One is you sometimes would provide something on the spot, like food, where they could actually eat some of it then, so it got rid of some of the immediate hunger that they had. But then when you escorted them out, you also gave them a safe passage to get out so that people don't come up to them and steal things from them on the other side. But I know one place in Africa, we actually drove a truck right up to the door to where a person could only one at a time get past the truck to get in the door. That was the only way they could get in, and then we were able to control the crowds. How can adults get immunization records? Well, sometimes you can get them from the schools, health department if you ever went there. Sometimes they're just not recoverable. Particularly if you moved around a lot. Sometimes it's just very difficult, or it just would become a real problem. If no records exist, that's just exactly what it is. It means no record exists, and you may run into some problems with people trying to force immunizations on you. Now, if you happen to know from your history, like you've had certain diseases, whether chickenpox or measles or whatever, they sometimes may take that as evidence you don't need those immunizations. But that's a very difficult question, and if they have a problem with it, they might actually force you or want to force you to take the immunizations. I would resist it if I could, if I didn't really want those.
If you really need to, some of them you can check for titers to see if you actually have immunity, and they will accept that as immunization, so you can go to your doctor. You have to pay for it.
Right, the problem is if you're dealing with hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, in your big shelters, they're not going to be listening to you and say, well, let me do titers.
No, but I mean ahead of time. If you want to prepare yourself ahead of time, you can go and get titers.
No, that would make some sense. That's a good suggestion. If that was of concern to you, you could actually then prove that you have immunity. My dad is 70 with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, is on oxygen at night and nebulizer meds. Any advice on how I can be prepared for this special medical needs? There are portable oxygen devices, oxygenators that are very portable. My dad had that problem, and so we actually would transport my dad when he would travel with one of those portable oxygenators, and so you would just have to have that available. And the nebulizer meds, of course, you would just take those with you. But no, those portable systems do exist, and I would have several on hand. And usually the insurance companies will cover that if you have a doctor's written prescription for that. What has surprised other people when they face an emergency? Katrina, evacuees, let me see. Having trouble reading that. What if you and your family need hospital facilities and they are closed, overwhelmed, or quarantined? Well, obviously, you try to go to the next place. Now, this is where, if everybody has some supplies at home, it's not uncommon to have some healthcare professionals with some knowledge among the people that you have relationships with. So I'm a physician, even though I'm not in private practice, I'm just a missionary. practitioners, nurses, people that can help with these, and I would say that I would try to get that help to the extent that I could. One of the things that I have done, and maybe some of you in the healthcare field could do this, I actually have gone out and bought medication, more than what my family would need, thinking that there could be a possibility I may have to provide something for my neighbors or people that I come in contact with during an emergency. And I've gone out and spent hundreds of dollars and just stored at home, try to get out. By buying new stuff, I can get it out 15, 18 months, 2 years, sometimes longer. And I've actually gone through my second cycle where I actually started seeing something started expiring and having to buy more, and I'm trying to then consume things. So what I did on my last one, since some of them were getting short dated, I took them to Haiti and gave them away and then bought some new stuff that has longer dates. So that's the way I handled that particular situation. Is there ever really enough preparation to be ready for disaster? The answer is no. Because there's always something can be unexpected. That's where it's a matter of abiding under the shadow of the Almighty. I mean, it's a matter of being led by the Holy Spirit. You cannot prepare for everything. There's no such thing. In fact, as a physician, one of the things that's very frustrating has been when it comes to malpractices. I think of poor obstetricians, and I'm not one, but where when these women have a baby inside that black box and the baby comes out, the physician is often held responsible for something they have absolutely no control over. They're just saying you've got to come out with a good result all the time. Well, that's just not the way life is all the time. And if the physician has made every good judgment they possibly can and still there's a bad result, sometimes people get challenged. And I would just say this is where your walk with the Lord makes a real difference. I remember I have this story in the book of a young man who, as he was going to cross I-35 up in Minnesota, St. Paul area, the Lord gave him a vision of the bridge collapsing. And he was on the road just before he got on the bridge, and he saw it collapsing. And he stops. It hadn't collapsed yet. He just stops in the middle of the road, and people behind him are shaking their fists and yelling at him and honking their horns. And a few minutes later, the bridge collapses. And then, of course, somebody came up and said, "Boy, am I glad you stopped." That's, you can't put that in a bottle and sell it. That's something that you got to be just in tune with the Holy Spirit. Does training happen during an emergency for people who weren't prepared? Not really. At that particular time, the cow's gotten out of the barnyard. Since closing the door at that point. That's where a wise person, when they see a disaster coming, prepares. And a foolish person doesn't prepare and suffers the consequences. Okay, here's that question about overheating in Texas. Boy, you guys have a hot state. Is it okay to store my 55-gallon water barrels outside in the backyard in the heat? And I would say no. I would at least keep them shaded in some way. They still are going to get hotter than what I wanted. And I would consider if I had to store water in that area, it would still be decent water, but I would use it. I would make it not evaporate, and then if I had to take it out rather than trusting it, I'd probably use my solar heater or something to boil it and make sure that it was fine. I mean, water's not going to become anything but water out in the heat. It just becomes hot water. But organisms can grow in the heat and that type of thing, so I wouldn't want to trust it if it's been out there for a long time. But if it was water and I was thirsty and I had no other source of water, I would then make that water safe and use it.
What if you have one of those large systems?
What if you have a 2,500-gallon tank outside?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter the size of the tank. You could use, in other words, you take water that's had sewage in it and strain that stuff and get it cleaned out and then treat it. And then it's drinkable. That's what we do all the time with sewer plants. I mean, in other words, when we treat sewage, it goes through multiple different steps, gets cleared out, and we add chemicals to it and clear out the bacteria. If that's the only water that's available, no matter how contaminated it is, you can make it safe. Boiling will make water safe. Now, if it's got crud and particulate matter in it, you get all that out first. You drain it, strain it, take a t-shirt off and drain it through. But then once it's basically kind of semi-clear, then I would boil it, and then it would be safe to drink.
And are you saying you just have to bring it?
What's that?
You just have to bring it to the boil, but not have to
Yeah, bringing it to a boil would be sufficient. Now, if you happen to have a whole bunch of junk in it to where to where there was limbs or other stuff that you weren't able to get out of the water and it was boiling, I probably would boil it for a period of time to make sure that whatever was inside, whatever the particulate matter was there. But if I can strain all the other stuff out and all I have is water, if I bring it up to a boil, the organisms are dead. Okay, where can I buy grains in bulk that are not genetically modified? Well, there's a number of products out there called legacy seeds, for instance, that you can actually, if you want to plant your own garden, you can do so. You can also buy organic foods that are guaranteed that they were not genetically modified, and so you can buy product that's organic. That's available. It's a little bit more expensive, but you can do so. But if you want to plant your own garden, they do have products, legacy seeds. Actually, I sell some of them on my website. But my goodness, there's so many places where you can do that. But it's of interest to me that there are some people that are trying to control the food production of the world to make people come back to them with these genetically modified products. One thing that kind of disturbs me is nobody has held these big companies' feet to the fire to prove that nutrition is the same as it is with the genetically unmodified products. Sometimes it looks prettier, it looks better, nicer color, bigger size, but doesn't reproduce. And I don't like sterility, if you know what I mean. I like things that can reproduce. Even Christians that reproduce, you know. Okay, do you know or have any comment on an article in National Geographic about purifying water by putting plastic bottles of raw water on sheet metal for 6 hours on sun to sterilize the water for drinking? I'm not so sure I would want it to be in plastic bottles, but I would assume that this is just basically another way of taking advantage of solar heat and using solar temperature to sterilize the water. I think that's basically a solar effect. You know, you can take tin foil in a box, in a cardboard box, and create your own solar oven if you want to. You don't have to buy a solar oven. Go out and buy those kits for $1 or $2, and they'll teach you how to make your own solar oven. You want to, he has a microphone right here.
There's a lot of information on the internet.
Can you put it close to your mouth?
There's a lot of information on the internet that tells how to make your own solar.
Oh, absolutely.
And
That's actually where I found some of my information. There's whole societies that make solar cooking part of their mission. In fact, there's a group that actually helps with mission organizations, and they will help send this equipment overseas if you're doing missionary work. And I said, well, I'd like to buy one here for the States just to see what it's like. And my wife said, what are we doing with this thing? We're having to store the thing. It's like this, and it comes with some pots. And I said, just keep it on hand. I mean, if ever we need to cook something. And the thing is, it actually is a neat way of cooking. And you don't dehydrate your foods with it. With the lid put on it, and when it gets up to the right temperature, the chickens stay moist. The one thing that doesn't happen is they don't brown like you'd like to see nice brown chicken. It just basically boils it, is what it does. So, but it's still healthy and good. How do you respond to the idea Jesus put forth? If someone asks you for a tunic, let them have your cloak also. And also give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Shouldn't we give away what we've just got stored and trust God to provide for our needs? That's an interesting question, isn't it? That has no simple answer. It's one thing if I am an individual and am only taking care of myself. It's another thing if I have a wife and kids or grandkids or other people that I'm responsible for. I can't necessarily say to you, hey kid, you go hungry, I'm going to give it to this guy over here who wants it more than you do. In situations, I think of Anne Frank and some of the situations during the Holocaust, the people, when they were together, they had common need and they shared things to the best of their ability to make it equal between different people. And to the extent that I could, I would try to share with people who had legitimate need. But I wouldn't try to just say, well, the guy wants everything I've got. That's not reasonable. But can I help him out? I'd try to help him out. At the same time, I probably would say, you know what, I could go fast. I've actually fasted for, 21 days, even 40 days before on just liquids and juices and stuff. So some of us have extra supply of energy that can handle it better than some kids or people that are growing. And so individuals will have to make that decision as to who gets more, who gets less. But I would not just give somebody in those situations just everything they ask. Because I'll tell you what, the next guy's going to come along and ask for the same stuff. I would try to figure out a sharing program as much as possible. That's where it comes back to your neighborhood networks. If you've got something where you've worked things out with your neighbors and you're all prepared, the likelihood that you're not going to be able to respond is much smaller. Yes, question?
The 10 unwise
Can you
virgins.
get the microphone? I'm not able to hear you from here.
The
The 10 unwise virgins didn't get any oil from the wise virgin.
Right. I think that's a very good comment. If only 5% of people are prepared, as opposed to 50%, I think if 50% were prepared to do that, of course, that's a very specific situation regarding the Lord and His return and being ready for that. It becomes very hard. I've been involved with missions now for 26 years, and I've been used to giving free medical services around the world, and it's very hard to turn people down. There are times in which I suppose it would become appropriate to do so, particularly if somebody has been very careless and been unwise. But like when I go to a situation like Haiti, where the people started off with nothing, and then all of a sudden even the nothing they had got destroyed. It's very hard to, if I happen to have something, to not give it to the person that comes along. One of the things that we have as Americans, and when we go even in mission situations, I can go to a situation as dire as I did over in Goma, Zaire, 10,000 bodies in the ground, 60,000 people dying over 6 weeks. I can still go there. I know how to make my food safe, my water safe. I have a safe place to sleep, and I know I can go home in a couple of weeks. It changes your mindset incredibly compared to somebody that's sitting there sleeping under a plastic tent with tall grass hollowed out, with, it's cold and wet and no place to really sleep, lying on the ground. I mean, our mindset is just so different, knowing that we can walk away from it. And so I think that the situation of what the scripture says when somebody asks you, that's in more of a normal situation as opposed to these dire emergency disaster situations. And those type of situations, we usually are in a position of having more that we can actually give away. But here again, if we're not prepared, we can't really help. So that's why I'll go back to, let me just see.
You
I
had
realize this is out of
another
order.
question out here?
I just have the question, you've been through a lot of people in their disasters. What are the things that you've seen that have really come on people who thought they were prepared? And the example I gave in the question that you didn't answer was the Katrina evacuees remembered their cell phones, some of them, but not their cell phone chargers. And, so as they were trying to contact their people or whatever, they thought they were prepared, but they were surprised. So are there any other things that we kind of don't think of that has come up?
Well, yes, let me give you the idea about cell phone charge. Of course, you'd have to remember to do this as well. They actually have some of these hand crank situations that have adapters that will work on many different cell phones that you could actually create that generate the energy by just cranking, and that you could actually recharge your phones. The other thing that you do is, if you have a cell phone charger for your car, make sure I leave one in my car at all times. So I've got a separate cell phone charger in every car. I have 2 cars, but each one has a cell charger. My wife and I have the same kind of cell phone. So if nothing else works, and I've forgotten the other one, I can at least charge it up with my car. So that's another idea. But some of them also have hand cranks that would work.
I just wanted to add a comment about the, we were talking about the 5 foolish virgins, and I had a friend that the Lord gave him a revelation, and it was for him personally, but for him, he was to store extra food for the unwise, because that was what was going to bring them to the Lord. So, you know, what I'm seeing out of this is we have to depend on what the Lord tells us to do with our food supplies, and you know, what's going to be kingdom purpose.
Well, that's an excellent idea. In fact, I actually have people saying they're storing up some things that they can barter. Who was it that said that beer was one thing that people could barter, cigarettes is another? I'm not storing any of those things, but I do have medicines. Medicines would be a barter thing if I had to in the future. But I got more medicine with a desire to help with people that would come across my path in a disaster that would not have access to pharmacies or to hospital care. So I've just tried to do that, but I'm kind of unusual in that sense. I don't think too many healthcare people have gone out and bought a lot of medicine with the intent of using it for people other than themselves. But I've done that just because I know what the needs are. But I'll use it for my family too. In fact, I've been toying with the idea of, we're getting together on July 4th, and I've been thinking, maybe I should be giving out some of this medicine for my kids to take home on July 4th, and we get together and I'll go out and buy some more. But some of these innovative ideas, whether having food, that's where you want to get as many people as possible prepared so that when they come, they're not knocking on your door. But here's the PowerPoint, put your own mask on first. Get yourself ready. And even in situations where I'm working with disaster preparedness people, I have found probably less than 10% are really ready, even among people whose life work is disaster preparedness. They're used to responding to others. They never think about themselves as being the ones that's going to have the need in their family. Other questions? What's that?
Yes. I'll answer it just a second. All right.
Marty getting directions from the left here. How do you work with or encourage people who just kind of look the other way when this is the preparing for disaster? Not a lot of people are interested in it.
Oh, absolutely. I would say the majority of the people aren't interested. They're, particularly among Christian folks, I find a real varied response. Some people say, God's just going to take care of me. Others just don't have time. In fact, in my book, I go through various reasons as to why people have not prepared. And I would say number one reason is people are just overloaded. They're just so busy, they just don't have time. They may like the idea, but they just don't take the time. That's where one of the things that I do encourage people that are interested in getting prepared, give gifts to your kids and your grandkids and family members, practical gifts like disaster preparedness gifts. I mean, they'll like it. I mean, you give them a water filter thing and saying, put this in your car or something like that, it will prepare them. That's what we did with our kids one Christmas. We just got a whole bunch of this disaster preparedness stuff and gave it to them because they just don't have time for it, to think about it. And it's also not on their mind. If you're raising several kids and you're running around and so busy with life, you just don't have time to think about it sometimes. But those of us that are thinking about it and are feeling compelled by the Spirit to get involved, I think we need to help encourage our family members, our neighbors, and if need be, call neighborhood meetings if you have that kind of relationship within your neighborhood, and start influencing what they're doing. And maybe take advantage of certain disasters when they do occur to use the piqued interest to get family